Right, so we've suffered through preparing the statement of cash flows, and now what does the statement of cash flow tell us? The first thing is free cash flow, and this is your cash flow from operating activities. They shorten it a little bit just because otherwise we wouldn't have room to write it all out. So you get your cash flow from operating activities, you deduct your capital expenditures, that's on your property, plant, and equipment, and then you deduct your dividends. And so what that tells you is once you kind of keep things going at their current level, in other words, you buy enough equipment and plant to keep things going as they are now, you pay dividends to keep the stockholders, your current stockholders invested as they are now, then what have we got left over for contingencies, for say there's opportunities that come up that we want to invest in. Maybe there's a downturn in the economy due to some silly virus or something. It's how much financial flexibility do we have to get through bad times or take advantage of new opportunities. So that's your free cash flow. So that's one thing that you can get, information you can get from the statement of cash flows. One that your book talks about is cash flow on total assets, and this is just a ratio that compares your cash flow from operating activities to your average total assets. Now these may mean nothing when you start to just look at the formula, but if you take sort of company A and company B and just take some simple numbers and do a basic comparison, say the average total assets for both companies are 100,000. Okay, so you're working with the same total assets. But company A manages to have cash flow from operating activities of 20,000, and company B generates 60,000. Well, which company do you want to work for, invest in, or own? Okay, so sometimes it is just helpful to plug in some numbers and just sort of see, well, what are these ratios actually telling us? So obviously, cash flow on total assets, you'd rather have more than less. Okay, another measure is cash flow yield, and this you're taking your cash flow from operating activities and dividing it by net income. And this one is a pretty good one to be aware of. So again, let's say you had net income of 100,000, and company A manages to generate cash flow from operating activities of 60,000, and the other company B, manages to get 110,000. This can be very useful information to have. If your cash flow from operating activities is really very different from the net income, that's sort of a red flag. You want to ask yourself, well, why is it different? What's the difference? Because if you remember, you've got things like depreciation expense that makes the difference, and you could have a lot of accounts receivable and sales revenue that are increasing your net income, but you're not collecting the receivables. So if you've got a fairly, a low cash flow from operating activities and a higher net income, you just want to, sort of see, what's going on there. Okay, so what else do we need to know about this? Those are the three basic ratios you can get out of it, but there's a few other things we can learn from the cash flow statement, and one is, what's the company really using its money for? Where is it getting its money? And so these are things that, if a company is getting their money from operating activities, that's probably a good thing. If they have a very low cash flow from operating activities and they have a lot of their money is coming in from selling off assets or from taking on debt, that would be in your investing and financing section, that's something that you could take probably a little further look at before you, go work for that company or buy stock in it. It can tell you, what's a company doing with its money, if they've got a good cash flow from operations, but they're using the cash flow to buy plant assets. Maybe they're expanding, or maybe they're using it to pay gigantic dividends to their stockholders, and they're not investing in their plant and equipment. So it's a fairly useful statement, and you can learn a lot from it. Let's see. What else do we need to know about this? Is it easy to mess with the cash flow statement? The answer is it's a little bit more difficult than with others, but companies such as Krispy Kreme Donuts, that great New York donut company, they actually messed with their statement of cash flows. They they moved stuff from operating activities to investing activities so their cash flow from operations would look better than it was. They, at the time, I think, were trying to expand up this area, which would have been nice if you like donuts, and they wanted to dress up their financial statements a little. So they messed around with their statement of cash flows. It did not go well. You notice they're not up here. Okay. One interesting thing, if you look at the notes, you'll see the cash flow statement at the very bottom of the notes, and it's from 2005, 2006, 2007. And you can see this is sort of an interesting one because the net income starts out at 32, and it goes up to 4, and then it goes up to almost 42. So the net income is going up. But then you look at what's going on with the cash flow from operating activities, and it's negative, and it starts negative 12, it goes to negative 36, negative 45,000, and that actually I think has 3 zeros after it. And then you look at where they're getting their money. The positive numbers are from financing. They're taking on more and more and more debt to keep their operations going. This was Lehman Brothers cash flow statements right before the financial crisis happened in 2008. So if you see a very negative trend, in your cash flow from operating activities, I guess make a long story short, it's a pretty useful statement.